Hello,
Welcome.
thank you.
We've got about 25 people who've registered, but a few people have reached out to say that unfortunately they're not able to make it. But so we'll probably be a little bit less than that. It's the time of the year where we're all busy trying to finish everything. Let's give it a minute or so. People are probably jumping from another call as well, as I tend to do. Hopefully, the 25 people are not going to prioritize something else. If not, we will have a cozy conversation. Well, I think somebody's enthusiastic about evidence.
Very enthusiastic about evidence, Florence.
Yes, that's a good point. Muscan hasn't joined in yet. I'm wondering whether some people are having trouble logging in, because I did make a mistake in the. But they managed to register, so they should have the right link. Oh, I've just got a message. Unfortunately, Muscans has a health emergency. She's going to the hospital.
Oh no. Okay. Severin and Justin just joined.
Oh, sorry, I'm just saying. Now, the question is, if she's not there, we would need to present her slides.
Has she
Apologies.
developed? Have you got a copy of her slides?
I did. Let me...
Just looking through her document, thinking, do I understand it enough to be able to present that?
Yes, I think kind of, yeah. But
Maybe
probably
between us we could cover for her.
Yeah.
Apologies, colleagues. We're still waiting for others to join. And we've had quite a few people that have sent a message. Unfortunately, they're unable to make it, that have registered. I'm not trying to find my scans. Colleagues, what do you think? Shall we start? Shall we wait a little bit longer for others to join?
Well, I think the hardcore is available for tough discussions, so we might start, isn't it?
Let's do that, and hopefully we had about 25 people who registered, but as I mentioned earlier, there's about 3 or 4 people that have reached out to say they're unfortunately at the last minute.
Hi everyone, nice to join you all. Sorry, I had a bit of trouble with audio as I was joining, so sorry if I've missed anything, but yeah, nice to join you all.
Hi Justin,
Justin.
lovely
Hi.
to see you. We were just saying we're going to start. We had we're still waiting because we had more colleagues who had registered, but I think end of the year frantic period, everybody's juggling too many things, and few people have said they're unable to make it. So maybe let's start. First of all, welcoming you. This is our last. Oops, sorry, I'm admitting as I speak. This is our last quarterly meeting of the year. For those of you, I think there's only one person who maybe is new to the group at this stage. Florence Martin, the Executive Director of Better Care Network, one of the co-convener with Marinus and Marianne, who will be introducing themselves. We're delighted that you're here. Margot, if you can go to the next slide, please. So our agenda, as you will have seen, is first of all, we're going to have updates on the work that's been done by some of the small groups that this working group has set up to address different objectives on their work plan. So we'll have a quick update on the work on the objective 1, which is the what is evidence for impact, which Marinus and Marianne have been leading on. We will have, although we just got the bad news that our colleague Muskan unfortunately is taken ill and had to go to the hospital. So we will try our best to do a presentation of the work that Muskan has been working on, which was a review in particular of the repository, a shared repository of planned and ongoing research on children's care, which we had one of the first initiatives that the evidence working group was doing, but we wanted to look at it hadn't really been used or how it had been used and ways in which it can be strengthened and be more useful for the community at large. Then we will have an update on objective 3, which is around this evidence agenda. And Sarah Neville, who is here, will speak about the work she's been doing on a proposal for an online literature review, a living literature review on children's care, which is straddling between objective 2 and objective 3, really. It's about understanding where our evidence is. And then we'll have a brainstorming on follow-up steps and next year's work plan. Before that, one of the things that we discussed, because there are new members joining, and also because, you know, we only meet every quarter, it can be hard to kind of remember what this group is doing, what the objectives are, what are we trying to achieve. Margot, if you can go to the next slide. We did a couple of slides just to refresh everybody. Some of you will be very familiar as to what the evidence working group's overall goals are. They're set up in our terms of reference, and then what our work plan is. So first of all, our strategy is to maintain an overview of the state of evidence, identifying gaps and opportunities, setting priorities for future research. In terms of impact, is to strengthen the application and impact of care research and data and evidence, both in relation to policy, systems change, and practice development. Knowledge sharing is another and probably the most obvious goals of this evidence working group, which is to bring together the expertise across sectors, including academia, think tanks, practitioners, civil society actors, and agencies, and different levels and different discipline around the evidence and the research on children's care, both addressing the evidence gaps, but also from a research perspective and from an academic perspective, but also from a practitioner perspective and from a system change, because we are about impact in terms of changing care systems for the better for children. Then consensus building, strengthening our common understanding and positioning on evidence. So having, that clarity as what we understand as quality evidence, but also different approaches to what that looks like, and different methodologies, and different approaches. Coordination, which we're going to talk quite a bit today. That's where the repository also come in, which is understanding the opportunities for collaboration in both the design, the execution of research, optimizing efficient use of resources, so not duplicating, which is why it's so important to know who's doing what, but also learning from them, from others doing research in the field, in many cases, learning and using new methodologies or testing new boundaries in terms of the use of that methodology, and strengthening our information system so we're clear about what we have and what we don't have, and the gaps we need to address and how we collaborate. And then improvements, enabling and promoting quality research practice in our sector. And that's where the sharing of ongoing research or planned or published research, the question around what we understand as quality, and really building that body of evidence for the sector that we can stand behind to impact practice. Where we talk about evidence-based practice, what are we talking about? So these were the overall goal. I hope it's helpful. And these are the goals that were set up right at the start, this part of the terms of reference of the Evidence for Impact Working Group. And it's going to be a summary of this major goal under there. Next slide, Michael, please. Then at the beginning of this year, Marinus and Marianne put together some of the key objectives that were discussed by the working group. Our first meeting, for those of you who were there will remember, we went through how do we follow up from the previous year, and how do we operationalize some of these objectives? How do we move forward on some of that? So the objective 1 is around determining what evidence for impact is, and we're going to be hearing a little bit more, and that's what we've been doing on the objective 1 and the paper that Marinus and Marianne have been working on. And we've had small groups. Many of us are in the small groups under these different objectives that have been meeting between the quarterly meeting and moving forward. And in some cases, the support of 2 consultants, experts who've been helping us moving this forward. Objective 2 has been about reviewing the state of evidence. So again, linked to those goals. That has included both the work around that repository, so understanding what's ongoing in planned research, what's happening in the sector in research, but also that discussion around mapping our evidence gaps. And that goes into objective 3, the detection of gaps and the development of a research agenda. It also includes reviewing the state of evidence. It also includes efforts where we've shared, where we've had presentation of research. So we didn't do as many this year because we often have so limited time, and that's a question for us next year. Do we want to do more of those? Where we've invited members of the group or other researchers to present. We had the main researchers that have done the BIP research, Bucharest study, that came to present the work that they were doing now in Brazil. If you remember, there was a webinar where there were opportunities to learn. In previous time, we've had more opportunities for members to share what are they doing or for other actors to share what they're doing in terms of research. And then objective 4, which is the promoting the quality of research. And these objectives are all interlocked. And so some of them are being advanced, but others require the first objectives to be reached before we can really make progress on these. So even though this is part of the agenda, it was always understood that, these are related. We can't advance at the same level on all of them because they are obviously related. So hopefully that helps in clarifying, both what the working group is and also what the objective have been, and then the work that we're going to be discussing today. Hopefully it gives us a sense of that. So next slide, Margot, and I will hand over to Marinus and Marianne for objective 1 for a brief update and and information.
Okay. Thank you. I'm Maurits van IJsselnoot. For those of you who didn't have the opportunity to attend this series of meetings, I'm a honorary professor at UCL, psychology in London, and adjunct professor at psychiatry in Monash University in Melbourne, specializing in family and out of family childcare, raising children, child development from all kinds of perspectives, from neurobiology to behavior and attitudes. We did not, if I may be a little bit shortcutting this first point of discussion, we did not make a lot of progress. We got the green light now, thanks to a small grant that Florence managed to make free for us, a small grant for students to help us finalizing this review, systematic review that we are which we started in the summer, to see what kind of research has been done on deinstitutionalization the past 5 years, quality of the studies, the type of studies, and the gaps that should be noted if you map them in total. And we reported about this, the first insights from a very much of a pilot stage in this project the last time, so I'm not going to repeat that, but we are looking forward to get some help to really make this a systematic effort and go from bottom up instead of top down, to see what evidence is, what counts as evidence, what might be effective in terms of application to policy. And so that kind of questions hopefully is going to be addressed in the next 3 to 6 months with help of master PhD students as research assistants. That's the idea. And everyone who would like to propose names, please do, maybe through Florence. I think that would be wonderful to have someone, a few people working on that, embedded in maybe in their own studies, besides grant to pay for some of the investments. Might be nice to spend also time in the context of the study, for example, a thesis that might be enriched by their experiences with this systematic review. Yeah, so I have been relatively busy lecturing, teaching, and research consultation in Ukraine, Kiev. This is not much of a progress in this first aim, objective one, but next round it's going to be speeding up with some help, I hope.
Thank you, Marinus. And we did, just for those who haven't, we'll make sure that they have the draft paper, paper on what is evidence for impact. And also, we did discuss at our previous meeting, moving forward with a kind of more in-depth workshop that would be bringing different researchers with different perspectives and practitioners as well, to be really thinking through what the paper is proposing, and to help finalize it and get consensus, on what we understand as evidence. So that will be something that we'll be looking to do hopefully in the early part of next year, just to add to what Marinus has said.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Any question on this? Just to... Not.
Is that workshop you're mentioning, Florence, is that a vision for that to be in person or virtual?
Oh, I would love it to be in person, but unless unless we get a donor that is willing to consider this, it would be fantastic to have it in person, and I think it would be significantly better if it could be. As you'll remember, part of the work plan was how do we move forward towards an in-person meeting on evidence, which is really needed. Unfortunately, that depends on finding the funding. So we haven't managed to secure that. But if there are, you know, actors that have some suggestion about of donors who might be willing to, barring that, it will be a virtual meeting, unfortunately. Thank you for that good question. Next slide, Margot, please. So this is where Jo and I are going to have to step in for Muskan, unfortunately, as she's had a medical emergency. And Muskan has been working on a repository of ongoing and planned research, which we actually started right at the beginning of when the evidence working group began. That was one of the first tasks we did. For those of you who started with the evidence working group at that time. Margot, if you stop sharing, I am going to try. And I apologize in advance if I don't do it very easily. I am going to try to share Muskan's I might ask Margot to do this. Margot, can I send it to you and ask you to do this? Because it's not coming up on my screen.
Yeah, no problem.
I have so many things open. I'll put it in the chat. This is where Muskan has pulled together the paper, the thinking, the recommendation around this repository. So again, just to say what the repository is and was, the idea was to ensure that as a community, we are aware of research that's ongoing related to children's care. We're aware of research that's planned on children's care. And that's part of those objectives that we discussed, which is to make sure that you know, researchers in this field, practitioners in this field, are able to share information, understand who's researching what evidence is being built, and what methodologies are being used, so there can be cross collaboration, we can avoid duplication, etc., etc. So we developed that repository. We had around, I'm forgetting the exact number, but I'm going to say about 50 studies at the time that were entered by members of the groups or the collaborative. Again, we're talking about ongoing or planned research, not finished research. And we analyzed what was in the database. We had discussion as part of the working group meeting around what priorities came through that, or what themes or what methodologies. And we had some great discussion, but the problem was the repository became quite stale. Both it wasn't so easy to access. There were questions as to whether, you know, how people could contribute to it and update it. And there were question of who can access and contribute, etc. Are there too many questions? Is it asking? So Muskan was tasked with reviewing the repository and consulting, and she may have consulted with some of you, with members of the group, with researchers, with other key actors, as to you know, what they found useful or not useful, what they found user-friendly or not user-friendly, etc. And so she went through the review. If you can go forward, Margot. And this is the proposal that came from that. Here we go. That's the background pretty much on the, if you can go ahead. So, as I mentioned, she reviewed the repository. She looked at this question of updating the data. A lot of the data, as you can imagine, by the time it was in the repository, related to research studies that had already been finished. So there was this also question of how do we keep updating and making sure that research that's already finished or published gets flagged and gets moved out of this database. And then there was this question of, you know, how do we make this database more of a useful tool, really, for the community? Jo, I wonder whether you want to come in on do jump in.
Yeah, I think
So-
you can, if Margot keeps going down, you can kind of see what the conclusions were around that, where you've got this list of challenges and constraints listed out that people were finding it hard to navigate. There was often duplication in those results in there, like you said, and not always complete questions were being skipped. I think we've mentioned a few of these things. If you keep going, there's some interesting things. I think this is an interesting table around some of the barriers and different incentives for different people participating in this repository, I suppose it would be. This sense that people might be reluctant to share information, might not know that this opportunity existed, difficulties in navigating. It was just in an Excel spreadsheet, wasn't it? So it wasn't like the easiest thing to kind of navigate and find your way around, or fully be sure that people were understanding it in the same way. And I think the barriers were similar across the different groups that she spoke to. And then also these incentives around wanting to build collaboration and networks, opportunities to maybe go for funding together if there's opportunities that align, or knowing about funding opportunities, idea of formal recognition, where people are being involved in the kind of processing of the information and that kind of thing, and obviously avoiding duplication and coordinating across studies. So there's some interesting, it's worth having a little look through this if you've got time. It's interesting to kind of see how people were feeling about what felt like quite a simple exercise, I think, when we started, but it's interesting to see how people experienced it or are thinking about it moving forward.
And just to add to this, it was this question that she asked as well of incentive. What's the incentive in putting your information, you know, if you're a researcher working on, or you're a programmatic agency that's commissioned research, what's your incentive in putting that information in the database, and what's most likely to encourage you to do so, and what's likely to stop you doing so? Fear that others are going to be, you know, bypassing you, using your work or your ideas, etc. And then just a very basic one, can't navigate the Excel sheets, or don't have the time, or not aware of it. I mean, the reasons why you might or might not contribute to it.
Yeah. And then I think this is the bit that probably Florence and I appreciate Muskan taking on, is the next bit about accessing, navigating the taxonomy, kind of coming at it from the technical side. And Muskan has come up with some great ideas around what would make a platform more user-friendly, wanting to think about things like the ability to search it and to navigate it. And she's done some great work in the document of kind of thinking through pathways that people would take to understand, to either input into the repository or update something in the repository, or to utilize the information inside it, and the things that we have to think about when we're designing that kind of a platform. Yeah. And then
can go down a bit. Yeah, the maintenance of it as well. You know, how do we make sure that it keeps maintained? Because that's what happened as well with the repository. People were not using it, and then, you know, if it's not live and people are not going to be, you know, moving their research out or letting us know. Some cases, for example, in the repository, there was some really interesting research being done that people were asking about, and the research actually was finalized but not published for a whole bunch of reasons that we're all very familiar with. You may have this brilliant research being done in commission, and then either governments or another agency is like, oh, we don't really like what we find, and they're not. But the interesting thing is, again, knowing that that research was being done was already stimulated quite a bit, because it was in a country where there hadn't been that kind of research before. But also, what do you know, like, you need to be able to communicate that research was done and it's finished, but it unfortunately won't be shared. So how do we, you know, kind of update that as well and make sure that that's communicated?
Then this is the stage 2, where now Muskan has made some proposals for how we could take it forward, how to better structure the process of gathering the information, engaging people in that process, and structuring the actual repository itself. Trying to remember what else comes later on. I'm wondering if there I don't know
Might
how
have to go
useful
down
some
a
of
bit.
those diagrams are to go through.
Quite
Florence.
nice, yeah. There's some quite nice diagram. I don't remember when they're in there. Yes, the user journey, but I don't think they're going to be readable here. But they are very interesting. I mean, Muskan did some really interesting work trying to, unpacking how, people come to that kind of information and how they share, again, this question of their journey, the question of the challenges, the obstacle. And so I would definitely encourage you to read. It's not a very long paper, and it's very interesting.
And very much about promoting accessibility and helping make it as useful as possible to all kinds of researchers and people who want to use that research or are kind of engaged around that research. So wanting to make it have a better interface, so it's not an Excel spreadsheet any longer, but it has a bit more of a web interface where you can easily find the projects, understand the details of those projects, update them if it's your project. Also thinking about having a user profile so we can see, so people can interact from their own profile. Yeah, she's tried to think through kind of the practicalities of that. I know we've had some conversations with Margot around what the current platforms that we have access to could manage. Is this something we can accommodate within either the BCN website or within the Transforming Children's Care platform? And there are pros and cons in different places. I don't know, Margot, if there's anything you want to add on that side of things.
Not right now, no. I think Muskan incorporated a lot of our feedback in terms of what was available to us through the platform and through the BCN website. And she incorporated a lot of that into this document.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can go down a little bit, Margot. So that's a lot of the proposal and the recommendation. One of the big question in terms, including of the platform, as mentioned, was this question of who should have access to it. And again, like because it links up to this question of why would people, the incentive to contribute, but also the fear and the challenges. So whether this would be open, for example, to publicly available to any researcher, or whether this should be made open only to the evidence working group or maybe the members of the collaborative. In other words, this sense of nervousness that was recorded, among researchers to be sharing what they're planning or what they are working on, either because it might lead to scrutiny or questions, or because it might lead to people, taking their initiative or their ideas. So that's also where the kind of the practical aspect of how do you share it, how do you use it, but also who's involved. And I think one of the things that came up from that was that it does need to be a closed, it needs to be a closed database or a closed tool that has some parameters. It can't just be open to anyone, because otherwise there is a sense that people are not going to contribute the information about the research or that they are doing or planning. Although there are, and Marinus, I know you mentioned this earlier, there are increasingly work globally in the academic world to encourage researchers to do so, and to at the very least share what they're planning and so on. And there are databases. So the other thing as well is encouraging, this community of researchers to also do that and to contribute to these databases as well. So a bit more transparency as well in terms of research. I think that's it, isn't it, Joe? We're not doing justice to clearly to the really important work that Muskan has done, and we're sorry that she couldn't be with us due to the emergency. But please have a look at it, review it, provide feedback. I know she'll be very interested in hearing any thoughts and feedbacks, and then we can brainstorm a little bit more about, okay, what next? What do we do with this? And how do we move forward on that? So we do need your thoughts and feedback on this to help inform the next step. Thank you. I think we can stop sharing. So that was under objective 2. And now we're going to be looking at objective. It's actually between 2 and 3, objective 3. And Sarah has been doing some work. So just now we were talking, just to reinforce, because sometimes we get quite confused. I get quite confused. We've been looking at the repository in relation to planned or ongoing research. And Sarah's been doing work about the research that's already published, the evidence that we already have, and what the gaps are. So please, Sarah, go ahead.
Thank you so much. All right, let me just get this going. So, my name is Sarah. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at Brown University, and I've done research on various aspects of the care continuum throughout my research career. So as Florence said, I'm going to be talking about this this proposal for how we can create a repository of the evidence that already exists and that has already been published. So I want to start off by explaining a little bit about the importance of having a strong like repository for organizing and collating our evidence. Hey, give it to me, please. Sorry, there's no school today. 1 second. Okay, so I was working on a grant application to the National Institutes of Health, and this is a little bit of what I was putting together. In each of these numbers in the superscript is a citation. So I had to really comb through the evidence on children's care in sub-Saharan Africa, in Ghana, and like looking for very specific citations about very specific topics. And the more evidence that I had in my grant application, the stronger my application would be to get funding. So in order to like obtain funding to close the evidence gaps that we have in our field, it's really important to be able to synthesize and to search and to like sort through the evidence. And this is another page of my grant application. And some of those things already exist. Like, for example, we have this fantastic systematic review that Marinus and his colleagues worked on together. And again, one of the good things about this is that it's published in a really high impact, reputable journal. And where evidence is published also matters to these academic research funders. But some of the limitations so some of the benefits of this sort of a systematic review is that they have taken all the evidence that existed and they've summarized it for us, and they've put it into a narrative, like told us what are the takeaways, so that we don't have to read every single study ourselves to figure out what the takeaways are. But then some of the limitations of having a systematic review in this format, in this like in a peer-reviewed journal, is that the individual studies that have been cited aren't necessarily that easy to find. They're not like searchable and sortable. So like, for example, when I'm doing a literature review to trying to figure out where are the research gaps that my future studies could fill, and I'm asking a question like, so this study in the Lancet answers a very broad question of what are the impacts of institutionalization and deinstitutionalization on child outcomes, on child well-being outcomes. But if I have a more specific question, such as what are the impacts of kinship care on children in sub-Saharan Africa, or what are the impacts of institutionalization and on children who are in adolescence, it's harder for me to figure out just from this paper where those studies are. And the other limitation of this traditional publishing model is that the systematic review is published one time, but then it's not necessarily updated over time. So something that is a similar idea of this like systematic review, this evidence, bringing together all of the evidence, can be seen here in UNICEF. They did something called a gap map, which is like more of a searchable database of studies on a certain topic to show where the evidence is and where the gaps are. And then they pair it with a narrative, which is similar to like what was published in the Lancet, so that you have both. You have the searchable database, and you also have a narrative that tells you what the takeaways are without you having to read every single study yourself. So this is an example of what the gap map looks like in UNICEF. You can see that you can actually, they have 561 studies in there, and you can sort and filter them by the outcomes that are studied in each of these publications, and you can group them and sort them in different ways. And then they also published it in a academic journal, what the takeaways are. And the fact that it was published in an academic journal gives more weight to the findings for certain institutions like academic funders, who for them it matters where it's published. And then in addition, I love this, in addition to, publishing it in an academic journal, they can also publish briefs, and they don't have to go through a lengthy peer review process. They don't have to be in, one 10-point font with no graphics and no pictures. And so they put these briefs together on more specific topics that are really accessible and easy for people to find. So our proposal for what we would put together to achieve these aims is I named it the evidence for, I think I named it the Evidence for Impact Hub or something, or the hub on evidence for child outcomes and care. And it would basically have two parts. And one of them would be this report, which we could call the State of the Evidence Report on Child Outcomes. And this would be, a narrative that synthesizes it for you, that tells you where the gaps are and where the gaps aren't. And then the mega map, or the gap map, on the evidence of child outcomes in children's care would be a sortable, filterable list of them. And so I'm proposing that we would separate this so that in the first phase, we would focus just on literature that relates to child outcomes. And then after we complete that whole process, we could do the process over again and look at literature that relates to systems, because I think they're kind of two different things, and it would be a little too overwhelming to do all evidence about children's care all at once. And this is kind of a mock-up of what that could potentially look like if it was on the BCN website. We could call it the Evidence for Impact Hub. You could see that you could click on this picture and you could pull up the report. And then you could also see that maybe we could also publish a version in an academic journal. And then you would be able to go down to the bottom and look at the mega map and search and filter and look at see visually where all the studies are. And this is the process that I've proposed for how we could get this done. This is the URL for the report that I actually put together, which I think was circulated. So it just includes which pages I'm looking at in each of these slides. So the first phase would be that we would have to get buy-in from the working group to actually agree upon this process and agree upon the sorting and rating criteria and the tagging criteria and the scope of what our systematic review would include and exclude. The second phase is we could pilot this process by using like one section of the Better Care Network library instead, because it would be a lot less time consuming than doing an actual systematic review with a database search. So we could use this piloting process just to figure out if the tagging and the rating criteria is working or not. So we could pick one topic like kinship care or guardianship, And then we could use the BCN library to test out that excluding and including process and sorting them and categorizing them. And then after we do that and we refine and finalize our process, then we would actually carry out this systematic scoping review of child outcomes for children in care. This would be a really big undertaking, and it could take some resources, and it would take a lot of time, probably a year or two. But I think it would be a really amazing gift to the field that would like pay off for years and years to come. And then we would take the results from that systematic review and we would populate it into software such as Epimapper that would give us this nice visual, this nice sortable database where we could actually see where the gaps are and where the areas of strength in the evidence are. And then finally, we would draft a report or a narrative, which we could publish either as a PDF gray literature report or as a peer-reviewed journal article, or both. And then after that, we would repeat the process for literature on children's on systems. So here are some of the suggested criteria and categorizations and ratings that I've put together just as a starting point. So I think that the overarching questions guiding the systematic review would be, what are children's outcomes in insert care situation here, whether it's kinship care, residential care, etc. And then what interventions and programs promote these positive child outcomes, and what other situations or characteristics of children and families impact child outcomes. So these are some of the inclusion and exclusion criteria that I've suggested. So I think that we should include gray literature and peer-reviewed literature. I think we should include only empirical studies, exclude case studies and systematic reviews. And then we should include any research that measures actual child outcomes and experiences, but not include things that are more on the process or the output level, such as caregiver well-being or caregiver stress, or just describing numbers of children without actually looking at how the children are doing. And then here are just a very quick look at some of the tagging. So we would tag every study by what child outcome is studied. Is it looking at physical health? Is it looking at mental health? Is it looking at violence and protection outcomes? Is it looking at education? We would tag it by care setting. So residential care, biological family care, kinship care, etc. If it's looking at an intervention or a program or not. And then special themes, which I think this would be really important, is does like a finite list of categories that are of special interest to us as a community. So does the study look at whether at children moving in between care settings, so deinstitutionalization and reintegration? Does it look at care leaving in adulthood? Does it compare characteristics of care settings? Does it look at gender? Does it look at disability, et cetera? And then, region, child age, methodology type, et cetera. Then there are some ratings that would be a bit subjective, and this is going to take a lot of consensus and work as a working group to figure out how we would do this. But I think that we need to somehow rate the impact or rigor of the study. And this really ties back to Marinus's work in the what is evidence for impact? What is impact? So what I've suggested as a starting point is that the 4 ratings that we would give each resource is: how actionable are the results? How relevant is the study to low resource contexts? How rigorous is the study? And how much participation by children is included? And somehow we could maybe see if we could create some sort of a combination score out of these 4 points. Again, this is just a starting point, and this is a much larger discussion about how we can actually do this. And the example that I have is I did a quick review for the purpose of this paper. And what I did is I just looked at some studies that were already published in an article that was a scoping review of kinship care in Africa. And so this is kind of what the back end would look like of like this sort of evidence map or gap map. So I put all the studies, all the 25 studies into this system. I tagged them all, and you can see it's filterable. So I was looking just when I wanted to write up the section, the narrative section about children's economic outcomes, all I did is I filtered by economic outcomes, and then I could see exactly which studies were looking at economic outcomes. I could see how many studies were looking at education, and everything is all nicely in here. And then you can see how it's kind of visualized in a preliminary gap map. So all I did was make the cell darker if there were more studies in this section. So you can see that even just this very quick and dirty gap map shows us that when it comes to kinship care and child outcomes in Africa, we know a lot about comparing care settings, and we know a lot about education, because education, you can see how dark this column is, but a lot of studies look at education, and no studies looked at child disability, and no studies looked at migration, and no studies looked at interventions for promoting child well-being in the context of kinship care. So this already even just with this really quick version that I did, we can see very quickly where the gaps and the strengths are in this evidence base. And that's my whole presentation.
Thank you, Sarah. This is fantastic, and what I particularly love about it is it kind of brings together the strands that we've been talking about, getting our clarity around what we understand as a quality evidence for impact and impact itself, bringing together understanding of what research and evidence we have, and understanding where the gaps are, and then moving forward to this promotion of quality evidence, because it is also responding to that. How do we, I mean, practically from a BCN perspective, people constantly reach out to us and say, well, what is the latest evidence on outcomes of children out of foster care, for example, and so on. And it's expected that, first of all, that this exists, and sometimes it exists, but only in very limited settings or on very limited aspect of it, but also that we have that knowledge at the tip of our hand, and clearly we don't. So it's also addressing the sector, having the ability to go back, understand what evidence we do have and what evidence we don't have, to the final point of what Sarah is mentioning. Also, we can advocate with donors. If we want to fill our evidence gap, A, we need to understand where they are, B, we need a strategy, and we need funding. And to have a more strategic evidence agenda, we can go to donors with that's credible and say, we can tell you where the gaps are and where the priorities are. So it's a wonderful, it's a wonderful way and thinking about what we can aim to. And as Sarah said, there are different stages. This is a very ambitious agenda. It's an extremely ambitious agenda. It will require resource, but it's also understanding how we can build towards that and the different steps towards that. So,
and
anyway,
something that I'm realizing I didn't really talk about is the fact that once we do this big systematic review one time, then we could repeat the systematic review every 2 years, and it would take like 10 minutes to do, to update. Once you do it once, you put all those resources in the future, keeping it up to date is really easy. So we could keep it dynamic and updating.
Yeah. It's extremely exciting. So we wanted to move to, you're going to have opportunities, of course, to questions, to any questions to Sarah as well on this work. I'm pretty sure we've got plenty. And also to have a bit of a brainstorming of what this means. Jo, what do you think? Do we start with questions and then go to the brainstorming? You're the Miro queen.
Gonna try. Well, I wonder if I'm wondering if the two might go together. Yeah. If we could get everybody thinking, and then I think the questions will come along, and we might be able to multitask a little bit. So is that okay, Florence? I think if we go
totally.
to the Miro and kind of get using it. Okay. So I'm going to put a link in the chat. No, I didn't put a link in the chat. I muted myself. Okay, I'm putting a link in the chat. to a Miro board. And I know some people will be new or unhappy about the fact that it's a Miro board. That's okay. It would be great if you could click on that link. It shouldn't ask you to sign up to make an account. You should just be able to access it and it'll give you a nice quirky name. But let me know if you're having any problems with it. And you should see, I'm also going to share my screen. Oh, lots of people already in there. How exciting, that worked. Yay. So you should see two kind of grey bluey boxes. I'd like you to come over to the left-hand side where you will see an obstacle race. And we're going to have a little game just to get us going and to help people learn about the Miro board.
You might want to say to people how they get to the left hand.
Okay, so a few quick tips on Miro board. To zoom in and out, you can either scroll. If you've got a mouse that scrolls, you can zoom in and out, or there are plus and minus buttons towards the bottom right. To navigate, to move around, if you click if you click and drag, you should be able to move the board around. If there's a different way of doing it on Apple, and I keep meaning to remember what it is, but I can't. I think you'd use 2 fingers and drag. And yeah, and there is a little menu to the left which has things that allow you to add like sticky notes or shapes. So I would love it if you could try and find your way over to the left-hand side and see where it says obstacle race. And in order for our obstacle race to work, everybody has to pick a row. So I am wiggling my cursor by the second row, and I'd like you to kind of line up and wiggle your mouse, your cursor at a row until you're confident you've got a row to yourself. And if this is making no sense to some people, please speak out. So I can see, so try and come over to the left. Not everybody is over to the left. Come to the left, click and drag, use the plus and minus buttons to try and find your way over to the left. If you're drawing rather than being able to click and drag, you might need to click on the arrow on the menu on the left so that you get a hand rather than an arrow, and that should let you click and drag to be able to move around. So I can see Florence and Margot because they've got names. I can also see a trailblazer and a developer and a creator. Excellent. Lots of people over on the left. Don't worry if you just drew a great big orange line, I'll fix it. Ignore it. So try and zoom in so that you can confidently see a row on the obstacle race. And we're going to take 4 minutes to see who can work their way across a row. Maybe what we'll do, I'll tell you what we'll do to start with. Grab a post-it note from the left, click on the post-it note symbol, and pop a post-it note at the start of the row that you're going to use and type your name in it. So you should be able to click on the post-it note, click where you want it to go, and you should just be able to straight away type into it. So I have put my post-it note on the second row.
Mine is minute.
The little circles will allow you, and the little two-way arrow will let you make it bigger.
Okay. I'm not doing very well.
So on the left-hand side, the 4th item down is a sticky note. If you click on that, pick a color, and then click again on the board, it will create a post-it note wherever you clicked.
How do you change the size?
Sorry?
Of the note? How do you change the size of the note? My notes are
If you
tiny.
click on the note, you'll get like 4 circles at each corner that you can click and drag to make it bigger.
So sorry, Joe, but this isn't working for me. I think my computer, I've got so many things open on it. It's all ground to a complete halt and it's going really slow. So and
Sorry,
it looks
Justin.
amazing and you've done loads of work on it, but it's just not happening for me. I'm sorry
All right,
about that.
you can watch everybody
I'm
having a
going to
go.
watch everyone in the
Justin.
obstacles. Yeah, good luck, everyone.
I don't think I can do it either. My-
no,
my
really?
my sticky note is not getting any bigger when I do the corner.
If you click, Florence, if you click on your tiny sticky note
Yeah.
on the
Where have you put it,
toolbar,
Florence? Oh, I see. I
there
got it.
should be a sticker size to the left of the fill color.
Is this
click-
yours, Florence? This tiny one here?
Yes, this is mine, yeah.
Okay, I'll make it bigger for you. Drunk. There you go.
How did you do this?
So you have to zoom in a bit and then you'll see the circles.
Oh, I see. This is where.
All right.
Frustrating.
How about if I pop a few sticky notes down, people can, oh, it's weird how tiny they're coming out,
They
isn't
are
it?
tiny, yeah.
Here we go. This one's a bit bigger
Mine's
now.
very
Somebody wants to
tiny as
claim this
well.
one?
Thanks, Jill. I think that was me. I couldn't get it big.
Whoops. Doing anything. I really have to do some training on Miro. And
Okay,
part
I
of-
can see
part
we've
of the
got a
reason-
few people there.
Yeah.
Can I help anybody else out? Don't be afraid. It's worth persevering with because honestly, this does become a really good tool for online
Yeah.
working.
Yeah, I think I am the orange lines, and I don't
Great.
know how to do anything else than make
Okay,
drawings.
I see you. So can you find your way over to the left? Can you click and drag the screen to the left? And then can you see the sticky note on the toolbar to the left?
Mm-hmm.
So you click on that, pick a color, click again,
Ah, okay.
and then you should just be able to type straight away as soon as you clicked. Oh, I see Sarah. Well done. We've got Florence, Barbara, Sarah, Margot, and Lola. Congratulations. All right, so those of you that have managed to put your name on a sticky note, start working your way across that line. Let's see how far people can get. And I'll carry on helping others so that you zoom in so that you can read what's in the tiny gray boxes. And it give you on each, it'll give you a little instruction on each box to follow. Sarah has already moved her star. Well done. Oh, it's like navigating on a horse race, like commentating on a horse race.
Oops.
Anybody else need help? Sev's in. Good job.
Come on, Florence, you're catching Sarah. Come on.
I am like so slow.
Yeah, if you can't
Oh,
make it work on your end, you can be the champion for someone else. We can see your names appearing. Excellent.
Remove the sticky note. Who knew that the evidence working group was so much fun? So this board for the circle. Let's see what it gets.
Great job, folks.
Nope.
Create.
Not so simple.
Oh, wow. Someone's really used that. Oh, it's Sarah whizzing along. Very good. Well done, Barbara. You've got your job in there. Good. Florence is moving along as well.
Trouble with circles. I'm adding things rather than changing. Right.
So right clicking is a good way to get a little menu up, and then there's lots of different options as to what you can do to change things.
I see. And this shape.
Like lots of things in life, it's the kind of thing that if you play with it, it kind of all comes together.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, I'm going to give you a minute countdown.
I'm going to cheat.
See how much further you can get.
Can't find the website one and how to click the Google taskbar.
Yeah, I've not got that far. I don't know. I can't help you.
Oh God, Margot, you need to help.
So lots of you are moving quite far along. Okay, 30 seconds.
Florence, you're my competition.
I
in this
know.
moment.
I was like, this is not fair. It's like, you know.
We're working. We're not a team right now.
I know, you're like
Uh-oh,
cheating
I
me.
broke BCN with the mirror board.
Cheating me. I don't even know, like,
Brilliant. Okay. Well, I think anybody who made any progress is a winner on this.
Yay.
Congratulations. I
This
think
was fun.
Florence, Sarah, Margot, and I'm not quite sure how far other people got.
definitely.
Barbara, you got quite far along. Sev was making progress. So well done, everybody.
Yeah, I couldn't find the Google sheet. I'm like, where is that?
I've not tried to do that. I'll have to find out and get back to you on that. Okay, great. What I will do is after this meeting, I'll share out some links to getting to know Miro, because I do think it's the kind of tool that we could make use of in this group, and you might like to just spend 5 minutes doing something.
And also, Joe, just to say, as you told us, Jamboard is going out of business.
Jamboard is going out of business, sadly, because
They're
it was
closing
very
Jamboards,
user-friendly.
which I found much easier. Definitely
Yeah.
with less function.
So if you can find your way over now to, or just look at my screen, it would be easy if you could find your way over to the section towards the right with the turquoisey theme, which is about the repository of planned or ongoing research. I can see Florence is there. It would be lovely. What we would love is to just kind of start a bit of a conversation around what your reaction is to the two proposals that you've heard, any feedback that you'd like to give at this point. And then we'd just like to hear ideas around resourcing and potential next steps. So there is a turquoise coloured board for the repository, which was the one that Florence and I attempted to present on behalf of Muscan. There is a link. This little document is a link to the document we were showing, which you can click on to open up. And these post-it notes, you can just click and drag, and they should, oh, they disappeared. That's unhelpful. Let me see if I can fix that. You should be able to click and drag and use them to add your comments. I'm hoping. Let me just make sure that they all come to the front when you click and drag them. Let's see, that's a bit better now. So yeah, well done. So the post-it notes are the easiest part to use. You should just be able to click and drag, and once you've clicked on it, if you start typing it, I promise it will appear in your post-it note. So if you've got ideas that you'd like to record on Muscan's one there, you can also use the stickers. I made you a little sticker bank just underneath. So if you want to really give 100%, totally on board, you can click and drag one of those up to say how you're feeling. Equally, if you want to go to the orange themed one, which is for the online literature review and evidence map that Sarah presented, and put the same kind of information in there, that would be great. You can click and drag to move up and down, or use the zooming in and zooming out function to help you move around. If you are stuck and cannot get into the Miro board, I'm happy to transfer. If you want to pop something in the chat in Zoom, then I will add it over onto the Miro board for others to see. So maybe we could just take a few minutes just to get some initial ideas down, and then we can open it up for people to talk a bit more, or to voice things out. Does that sound okay?
That's great. But your sticker bank is disappearing. Probably because I don't know how to use it. I'm not sure why, but my stickers are disappearing.
Are they?
Yeah.
I've never experienced that.
I'm trying to put it under the second one and they disappear.
Under the second one.
Under the online literature review.
Oh, really?
Or maybe I need to. Okay.
Oh yeah, they're going behind. Hang on, I'll
Yeah.
fix it. Have a go now, Florence.
Thank you.
I think the sticky notes are disappearing too. Sorry guys, I should have checked that. Great. Well, I can see some people are making it work, which is helpful. If people aren't getting on with Miro, which is totally fine, please do speak out or type in the chat and I will transfer over.
Do we want to maybe start with the repository, asking people to give some feedback?
Anything? Should we go through question by question then? So thinking about the repository, does anyone want to give their reactions to it or provide any feedback on what Florence and I presented on behalf of Muscan? Not sure if I can see hands, so feel free to unmute and share.
Hi, Justin, just jumping in. No, just really great work. I mean, both the presentations, all the presentations today were fantastic. Really exciting projects all around across all different streams of work. And yeah, I think particularly with the stuff around Muscan's work, I guess, you know, I've seen the Google form on it and it's so unwieldy, isn't it? And it seems to scroll across. It's a bit like Miro board. Yeah. It scrolls across and there's bits everywhere that I find difficult to kind of look at. So yeah, it was good to read the bit that was about to hear the bit about it being presented in a really accessible form for people to use. And but I'm guessing with that's going to need some resources and some technical knowledge for somebody to do that. I'm sure there's people in the network and people you know that could do it. But yeah, just conscious about the resources to put something like that together, but also the importance about once you've got something like that, keeping it updated as well. So project, because as you say with the Google form, people initially put stuff on, my understanding of it, but then if it's not somebody that's continuously working on it, it can die a death, can't it, unfortunately. So yeah, it's about set it up, but also being, you know, mindful of resourcing it to keep it going was my initial reactions on that one in particular.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Totally. And I think, Justin, just to add to what saying, this question of incentive, as you point out, like it's the ease of access, but it's also how do we work as a community to create incentives for people to put their research, to encourage them to address their fears about why, and also their interest in checking it. So we do have to think as well beyond the technology as to how to do that. And I think Muscan does propose some really exciting ways. So for example, when somebody contribute to it, to the database, if I remember well, it would be like you would receive a note, you know, saying recognizing what you've done, and the community would see, hey, new piece of research by Justin, and this is what it's about, and it's exciting, and encouraging people to see that their research and the work that they're doing is valued, but also enabling them to exchange about it.
Great. Anybody else like to provide your reactions or feedback to this first one? Or any thoughts that people have on, like Justin's already touched on, the resources that we might need or resources that you might be able to offer towards this endeavour? Love the fact that someone has written already, I will contribute my studies. Yeah, I think that's definitely going to rely on everybody kind of engaging with it. So we've got a few people writing about the technology needed and a team to keep it going, and about the need for comms and outreach so that people know that it's there. And we did talk at one point a little bit about the potential of this pulling people into this working group community, like, you know, as an incentive of helping people to kind of come and participate and be part of the ongoing work.
Wonder if something like just thinking out loud, the stuff around whether the BCN newsletter, whether there might be a little bit at the very end of that talks about new projects that have been attached to it. You know, it might work for the first few times as you're setting out. Oh, sorry, Barbara, I didn't see your hand up. I've jumped in chatting again. But yeah, I wonder if that might work so that people can see on the newsletter, you know, so-and-so's registered this study and working in this area on this topic. Just to, might be another way of getting interest in it.
Right.
That's a great idea.
Barbara?
Actually, I think I'm on Barbara's link. This is Carrie. I just wondered, for the first one, at what point would people be entering their vision? Because I put the potentially serving as a marketplace to line up academics and practitioners if they're both interested in the same thing. And I'm just wondering at what phase does that happen? Is it ideation phase or once it's already going over?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we I can't remember what Muskan had written about this idea, but I think we've wanted to kind of capture at the kind of during design phase as well as kind of already implementing, but seeing the value of also kind of letting other people know what you're beginning to think about because that's often a really good point for collaboration to understand what else is going on and whether other people are interested in it or potentially thinking about a similar thing. So I think we were kind of considering quite a long time frame.
It mentions the resource intensive, and we did have some discussion. I think the resource, I mean, it will depend on of course, what kind of software we can use in terms of making it the interface more friendly than an Excel Google Sheet, which is clearly not friendly in any shape. But the resources are probably not that huge in terms of setting it up. She says hopeful. The updating, this is also why we were looking at building from the BCN platform, because and I'm looking very strongly at Margot there. That's, you know, we do have with Margot an expert who can help actors to update this, who can help make sure that information, and just adding another job to you, Margot, just now. So it's building on resources that are already there, rather than thinking of creating an entire new structure, which will require people, which will require, I mean, we do have to be realistic about, it's hard enough to keep BCN funded, not to create something that sounds great, but it's just not going to be funded in a sustainable way. So
it needs to be a collective effort, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This is an interesting sticky that someone has added, saying we may need people in the community to contribute info about other people's studies that they have heard about, because not every researcher will participate, which is an interesting idea. I don't think I'd really thought about it from that angle. I think that raises all sorts of issues as to is that helpful for us to do that, or is that counterintuitive maybe, because what we're trying to promote is collaboration? Should we be trying to pull those people in? Do we want it to be comprehensive? Yeah, it's a really interesting point. Feel free for others to add your thoughts as well. I've not thought about it from that angle. That's setting my mind going.
I wrote that, and I was just thinking of people like, you know, the Bucharest Early Intervention Project, and I just learned about a UChicago researcher that's doing an NIH study on reintegration in Azerbaijan, but she's not really plugged into this community as far as I know.
Yeah, it's interesting.
But would this be an opportunity to plug them in, even if it's only to contribute to this? So, you know, the contributing to the database doesn't have to be somebody who participates in every meetings of the evidence working group, but it could be somebody who just does that, but at least become part of a bigger community, knows what other people are doing. So I think if that can be an opportunity to pull people into this as a common, you know, knowledge database, that already is a huge step. I think it's going to be hard if you add stuff without people's permission.
Well, so there's a lot of like people publicly present and publish on studies that are underway. So for example, this one, Azerbaijan, she's already published like 2 qualitative pieces from the beginnings phases of her research that makes it clear that this is an ongoing study.
Yeah.
You could just throw that article in the repository, you know.
Interesting.
Justin, I see you've got your hand.
I guess what that does raise as well is the accessibility of it in terms of language as well for some people. You know, if it's in the English language, I mean, yeah, you might be doing someone a favour, Sarah, for example, if they're not right, if English isn't their first language. But then I guess that begs the question: how are we going to make this? You know, with all the adaptive technologies and things that are out there now, a way to make sure we could use it in different languages as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a really good point. A lot of the platforms allow for crossing languages now. I guess we've only got a little bit of time left, so let's move on to the online literature review and what Sarah presented. There are some great comments in here already. People being excited and impressed, but a little bit daunted. I think that's probably a reasonable reaction. Feedback needs some care about establishing markers for potential impact. Yeah, that's definitely an area we recognize as needing more work and needs to be a collaborative effort so that we're linking it to what we're trying to define as evidence and impact. Great, loving the little stars. Someone's being Miro happy over here. Great. And in terms of resources, we've got active participation of the working group to agree on the process and criteria. Yep. 5 to 10 research students to carry out the systematic review. Excellent. That sounds like some experience. It does feel like the kind of activity that is well suited to students or interns. Like a lot of student programs run like a summer internship as well. That could be a useful way into for them into this sector. Any other thoughts about resources that people want to voice out?
Just a quick one. Sorry, I'm conscious I've spoken a lot, but I'm just really keen in all this. You know, there's been a lot of people that have been attending these groups and the working, you know, the working groups and the different objectives. I think we really need to make sure that everyone's involved in it. You know, because it is exciting and there's opportunities for us all, right? If we've been involved in it from the start now. Look, I know Sarah, Muskan and Marinus and colleagues have pushed it forward individually, but it'd be really nice if the rest of us could come along on some of these bits as well as it starts to develop. Yeah, I'd love to be involved in it.
Brilliant. Thanks, Justin. Anybody else want to say anything around the resourcing side?
I think I would just add the incremental nature of it and recognizing this is such an exciting, and we are going to be moving, it will have to be done across different stages. And I mean, Sarah's already highlighted starting with outcome, but even within the outcome, that's a massive review of literature. Although as we're learning even from the preliminary finding that of the study that Marinus and Marin have been doing, and as I think most of us kind of suspect or know, we actually have less evidence than we think we do, and so it's going to show massive gaps. And if you look at even at the Innocenti work around different aspects of child protection and map data, it's quite shocking how on some key aspects of, for example, child protection or child well-being, you can see some areas that are where you have reasonable amount of evidence, and then you see some areas that you would expect that are pretty much drawing a blank. So I think that's also going to be part of the reality, but it's a really important reality check because it also sets the priorities for where our energy should be to address those gaps.
Great. I'm going to suggest, Florence, that we leave this Miro board accessible and share the link again. Please do take time to read through the 2 proposals that are linked here or that have been shared in the chat, and share your feedback. I think it's fine to share feedback over email or to pop it in the Miro board here, however you feel comfortable, or straight in the documents themselves, I imagine. It would be really great to hear feedback and ideas to progress this.
And maybe just to add, in the new year, as we start this work, we're going to take the work that's been done through the small groups and brainstorm further with you about the follow-up work plan for 2024 to build on this and on this strategy.
It would be great to get some thoughts on the next steps. I know it's hard if you maybe haven't delved into the details yet to kind of think concretely about next steps, but I'm noticing that that's where we've got no feedback yet. So maybe when people have a chance to look a little bit deeper, there are next steps in both proposals.
Yeah.
So even if you just want to say, I agree, or how about this variation on what's already proposed, that would be helpful.
Thank you. Any final thoughts, reflection, feedback? I'm seeing some in the chat. Oh, yes. The Miro challenge. I, for one, am very excited and really grateful. I'm very sorry Muskan is not feeling well and couldn't be here, but there'll be opportunities when she's back, of course, for her to present, and really grateful to Sarah for doing this incredible work and for really, providing us with a very concrete and exciting way forward on what could have been easily just a daunting prospect, but now we have some very concrete proposal about how to move forward, and exciting ones. So thank you. And of course, thank you to also, I do want, as we're coming to the end of the year, to thank Marinus and Marion, who've been amazing co-chairs for the time you've spent helping move this process. And to you all. It's, it's we know it's difficult to make time. There are so many meetings, there are so many priorities, but we're really grateful to you being part of this group. We need to bring more actors, and hopefully next year we'll be able to do that into this discussion, because this is a really critical part of having, moving our agenda, all of us, whether we're researchers, donors, or practitioners, to actually deliver the changes that, and demonstrating we're delivering the changes that we want for children. So thank you so much. Marinus, Marion, any final thoughts? Or Joe? Nope. Then we will thank you. Joe, any final words? So thank you so much. And for those of you taking some time off over holidays, have a wonderful, wonderful break. Be safe, be joyful in a world that is not always joyful. And we'll see you in 2024, if we don't see you before. Bye, friends.
Thanks everyone. Bye bye.
Ismail is still with us. Ismail, if you're still here, I have got your email about the photos. I know they're still there. Can you hear me, Ismail? Maybe not. Okay. Can we keep the Miro boards running?
Yeah.